Good morning, Chuck. So today's scheduled topic is budget, 2022 budget, and to just kind of touch base on where things are at as we begin the budget process for 2022, and specific to the different groups and organizations that you represent, and that, and obviously the CIC itself. One of the things that I think is backwards this year is normally we would have had some clear direction on what it is that we're going to be working on for the following year, because we would have already done strategic planning. If you've seen my report for the last 5 months, I've been calling for strategic planning. I think we're in desperate need of strategic planning. We haven't had any joint meetings of any of our boards this past year and a half. I think that that is critically lacking at this point. Because it seems like we've got a bunch of different directions going on, and whereas before we've had general alignment on the things that we're working on. So that is something that desperately needs to be done. But one of the things I guess I would ask the CIC to consider doing even this fall still, if nothing else, doing your own strategic planning. We can invite the other boards and committees to participate relative to the new comprehensive plan, and specifically the items that you would be working on for 2022. So let me just throw that out there in the parking lot here for a second. And any thoughts, comments from anybody?
When will you feel like the comprehensive plan will be given to the CIC to start working on the goals and strategies?
So we weren't able to adopt it last night because we didn't have the referral back from Ontario County specifically. So it was continued to the August town board meeting, but from everything I understand, I have no reason to believe the town board won't take action at the August meeting.
So we will get it, our second meeting then in August, and presumably we could start talking about our strategic plan that time.
Or even by September, which I think would still.
September is more realistic, actually.
I mean, it's just.
Any thoughts on it?
So when they have actually have a public hearing for the strategic plan, the master plan update, do people usually participate, or is it pretty much open and closed like many of the public hearings?
Well, you were there last night.
You've been there.
I know.
You were there last night. I mean, they
But by
opened the
that time,
public
many
hearing.
people had, quite a few people had left, and wow, I didn't know what they were there for, but.
The group that was on the front row, they all had participated in the planning board meeting relative to planning or Canandaigua Shores.
Oh, well, that's what I
Okay.
figure, yeah.
And they all, I noticed at one point, got up and left, and then one of them sent me an email this morning, just wanted to chat, I think, about that, but that's with the planning board, not the
Okay,
planning
well,
board.
that's what I had figured.
So the public hearing is still open. and,
Yes.
For the comp plan, yes, the
Yeah.
public hearing is open. Nobody
So they
spoke
haven't
on it
changed.
last night at all.
General rampant apathy.
Not active.
Until something happens.
That's right.
Oh, yeah,
that
until
people
it's in
don't
their
like.
backyard,
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah, I know.
knows.
That is a very common trait among all politicians, I guess. But one of the things I would like to feel out is when we get these goals and comprehensive strategies. One of the things I've been thinking of is how do we, a lot of the goals are directed to specific committees and individuals. And we've got now, what was it, is it 10 or 11 aspects of the goal plan out of the comprehensive plan. So it seems to me that we have to start talking to those responsible parties about which of the goals they are going to be implementing in their strategic plan, probably for 2022. Because that, if they're going to be working on something, then, we'll be aware somehow that they are, so we can then move to those things that are not necessarily them, but we still have to keep track. We're still going to have to keep track of all this. And that's my question,
Right.
is that there has to be some kind of a tracking process that we have to institute in order for them to, keep on board
Right.
with the plan here. just like in the strategies for the open space, that was directly given to our, to the ECB, and the ECB follows the guidelines there to implement those goals and strategies, so they're now going to have the new comprehensive plan and their goals on top of the other things that they do. So this might be kind of burdensome and cumbersome for some committees who haven't really looked at their plan.
Well, each of the committees, so the draft was referred to every single committee and they all went through and provided input. So in the chart in the back, in terms of the action steps, it has the responsible entity and it has the primary entity listed and the secondary, which might be multiple entities. Now I'm going to make an assumption here. This is a big assumption on my part, that the town board is going to say, okay, CIC, you've done a great job. Go implement this one now, right?
Exactly.
So
That's the
then-
assumption I'm making.
Yeah, right. So then, but you're right, it's gonna be the CIC to kind of help manage what's going on. And that's where I think a joint meeting of all the boards and groups and
I was
everything.
just going to ask
Yeah.
for,
Right.
I think it's critical at this point. And I think they should be charged with looking it over before we have that meeting and coming up with perhaps the top 3 to 5 goals that they would try to achieve in the 2022 year.
And then what we'll have to, we'll have to break it down just like we did before, where, a number of you were, when we did the original one. We went through every single action item, we did the little circles or whatever it is that we're gonna do. There's new technology now where we can do it electronically using cell phones and stuff. But anyway, we can do all of that stuff. But we need to do it, because otherwise there's no way we can say there's 15, 20 action steps in some of the goals and there's 10, 15 goals. I mean, you're talking about a couple of hundred action steps. It's impossible to do that in a year.
Mhm.
You work on 3 to 5 in any given year. Otherwise,
If you're
you don't
lucky.
accomplish anything
Yeah.
if you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
And we still have stuff that's been held over that we started in early 2020 because of COVID, right? And that we're just now finishing up now. So we really got to fine tune which items it is that we're going to work on. And then normally what we would do is we would have fine tuned that to this point, and then we would make our budget request based on that. So we're behind the 8 ball. We gotta get caught up in that piece of it. So. Karen, did you have something else?
I was going to suggest a group meeting. Actually, I think it was really effective in person when we went over all the what we had achieved and what we still needed to achieve at Ononda that time.
All right, that was a
Yeah,
great meeting.
It was a great meeting, I thought, because first of all, there was more than one member from each group. And so there was input from, if you just have one person from each group attend, you tend to get just one part of the picture.
Right.
And I think that was more effective.
I have to say it wasn't the most attractive thing, but I liked when it was on the walls and we could see,
I did
kind
too.
of, we
I
could
thought
check it
that
off
was
and see
great
what we've
too.
done. Having a physical reminder when you're in a meeting is good too.
We actually have, and they're upstairs, Parks is responsible for maintenance associated with town hall as well as all the parks. And I know it's on their list of things to do. We have a whole new parks maintenance staff. But we actually have, and Joyce, I know you had originally requested them. We have like these rods to go in this room around the walls so that we can hang like not only all of our maps, but then our comprehensive plan goals. So the plan is to kind of make this like our working room. That way it's not making another conference room. But this room gets used for a lot of the work type stuff. It's kind of like a working group room. So we'll have that. So it's a little bit more visible.
So do you see this group meeting as at a time where the CIC would be presenting what our plan would be for how this could work, getting input, of course, from them, because we're not, even if we send them, the committees now I'm talking about, send them something that says, hey, this is the goals, all on one page, these are all the things, they might, they are going to have to think about it for a while to consider how they can squeeze in this one, or maybe this is a no-brainer, and we can do that one next year, but they have other plans too that they're working with, so they're gonna have to coordinate that among themselves. I don't know how ECB, for example, only meets once a month. So they would have to, go through this, about it, discuss all this stuff. So when do you see this joint meeting occurring so that we could give the committees enough time, or the responsible parties enough time to actually figure out what do they think they want to do? I mean, we can explain to everybody what our plan is, and we would hope that they would give us some good feedback. I just don't know if they'll have enough time to give us any good feedback until they've really reviewed it and actually are starting to think about their 2022 plans.
So here's, and I don't mean this meanly, and everybody gets busy doing other things, but in my experience, these committees and these groups, they don't actually focus on it. If we just said, we want you to review it and give us your top plan or whatever, they're not gonna do that. So that's where I think holding this joint meeting, holding the strategic planning session, we'll get the input of all the groups, and hopefully we can get the participation from all the groups. I mean, if we include all of our project teams and everything, I think we're still 60+ people, whether that's remotely or hybrid or whatever we end up doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's exactly probably what will happen. And I'm talking about the time frame that this all will take place.
Mhm.
But if you only got, if you start in September, October, November, December is kind of okay, fine.
Right.
Will we have our project plan done by 2022? That's what I'm saying. By December, are we gonna have enough information from everybody so that we can say, okay, fine, these are gonna be done, so maybe we'll do this or we'll do that, because we gotta be planning in this,
Right.
in those 3 months that everybody else is planning too.
Well, like
It's
we,
just a consideration here, that's all.
right, no, you're absolutely right. I think what we've done before is we've said at the December town board meeting, the CIC has presented to the town board, here's our action
Yeah.
plans for 2022.
We all have to have our action
What
plans.
I'm saying in my mind is, that's the hard deadline. The
Yeah.
CIC by the December meeting has to present to the town board their priorities. So working backwards from there, you don't have much time to
No,
get.
That's right. Not if you're asking other boards and committees to respond
Mhm.
to what we need to manage.
That's where I feel like it almost has to be a retreat or joint board meeting, whatever you want to call it, where everybody's doing it together.
It might be interesting to charge all of the CIC members to go through the master plan, the different elements of the master plan, and come up with their top choice from each division, from
Mhm.
Parks and Rec,
Mhm.
from ECB, et cetera. I think it would give us insight.
And more direction.
And more
you mean,
direction.
to those committees, is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
Right, yes.
So
But
keep
the
in
one thing
mind,
about that is that we could do that, but we don't know what the other half of their plan is.
Right.
I'm just thinking of ECB here, and I know that they give, they'll be giving in-person probably, stuff like that. And so, they've got their own work that they're doing with other documents.
Yes, I agree.
So if we say, gee, we'd like you to do number 2, 3, 4, and 5, that might not work for them. They could say, well, with the rest of the stuff we have going on this year, we could probably do number 1 and 2. So
But my goal is just to charge them with reading it, looking at it.
okay.
Well-
Scare them to death.
Well,
So
Yeah,
then-
right, that's
they say,
what I'm
hey, this
thinking.
is, I agree. You have to help them to understand their responsibility. for
well, the
this.
good news is they have gone through. This was referred
Exactly.
already to each
Yes,
of the
I know.
committees, and they provided input. The other thing is, let's be realistic here. I just counted them. There are 22 individual responsible entity groups associated with this comprehensive plan. There's no way, even if we did one from each group, that we could do all that. So that's where I feel like a joint group to focus on those top 3 to 5 that we're really going to focus on. And to your point, like Planning Public Works, I'll use that as an example. They're a listed entity, and yes, there's some action items that they need to help take the lead on, but they have a whole lot of other things that are already on their plate, so that aren't necessarily associated with the comprehensive plan. So if we could get them to work on one,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
Yeah. That's
You
right.
know, But that's where we've got to fine tune that, and we've got to have these types of conversations with those groups.
Yes, those, with 22 responsible parties, that's a totally long conversation.
Right.
That's hours of.
24 of them.
There's 24, I missed two.
I mean,
I just
I don't
counted.
know how, I don't know how far in a joint meeting we would get with each one of those entities. I don't know exactly how that would work. It sounds like it's a multiple meeting format, or either it's, I don't know. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, let us work on some logistics and stuff.
And it is a lot. So just keep in mind too, every year the CIC, we write a resolution, we recommend to the town board what we want our priorities to be. We have learned that if you've got more than 3 or 4, it's just too much. Because these are big goals. These are, comprehensive plan. It's not let's fix County Road 28. It's, and so we've learned over the years not to try and bite off too much. So for each goal, we shouldn't be trying to do 5 steps from each goal. If we even picked 1 from each goal, that's 10 priorities. That's too much. We can't tackle every goal every year. We're gonna have to prioritize based on what's the most important.
And some of them are continuous, like,
Right.
Things that as things come up, then you revert back to the comprehensive plan. But there's others that are specific action steps. And what we're talking about is those specific action
Yeah.
steps.
And like
Or
you said, yeah, some of those action steps are things we already do, but that we need to make sure we continue to do them or improve on them. But there are some, as we know, that, yeah, we haven't done it yet and we need to make sure it happens. But yeah, we don't want to bite off too much because then we won't do them as well as we could, I think.
But I think there's a difference here between what we're gonna do as a CIC and then how we're gonna manage all the other things. Those are 2 separate projects as I see them. Sure, we're gonna say we can do this and we can do a committee for here. We'll get together a committee or whatever, but we don't know what the other responsible parties are going to come up with, but still we have to manage that information. So that's why I think this is kind of like a 2-pronged
Or
opportunity here.
monitor it. If it's something that the
Well, it's the
CIC
same
as a
thing.
group that we aren't specifically doing, like maybe it's not something we start a project team, maybe it's something, well, just for your example, maybe it's an activity that the ECB is gonna do. That doesn't mean that we're all involved, but it does mean we want to follow up.
Management is following up, I think it comes down to, what we do with our schedule for the year. This kind of sets up for us, so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here. It's just how we envision how that wheel's gonna turn this year.
Well, and the other thing, and I'm glad Adeline's here, and we've got an election coming up. We'll see who is on the town board, but there's gonna be some changes on the town board on the first of the year. We've got some new staff. Lindsay, Shauna, the town historian is new. Some of it is going to be getting all of our new individuals in their different new roles up to speed on some of the stuff that we've been working on for years and understanding some of the logistics of what we have and don't have and those types of things too.
And I can speak as a newbie. It takes at least a year,
Right.
at least.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So we only have 10 meetings between now and the end of the
Well, there you go.
year.
And we're not even envisioning working on that until September.
Exactly.
I mean,
How does everybody feel if we push for a large joint meeting? Maybe it's not on the regular CIC time, maybe it's something outside, but towards the end of September, people will be back to school. Life will start to return to normal. We can do it,
really?
hopefully. Right?
May I recommend you do something in an evening or a weekend to, if
Evening
you're
is- I
hoping to
think
get
it's
people from, outside of town or.
It's, yeah, weekends, we've tried some different things for the weekends, weekends is tough. And it's hard with staff too, weekends, but we can certainly do something on the evening. It seems like we get better results, I feel like, when we do it outside of the town hall building.
Yeah.
It becomes a technology issue for us, but we'll figure that out now that we have internet.
We can go back to the charts on the wall that you actually use.
We can do stuff like
something like
that,
that.
right? We can do stuff like that.
Because I think people need to be busy when they're trying to get their minds to work. I think they need to,
Maybe the chart just ones that are designated priority, because there's so damn many goals.
I
Just
I know.
focus on the priority ones.
I really like what Bergman did, for example, with the Middle Cheshire Road study, where they basically put several charts up and said, you know, mark a check here, put a sticker here, whatever it is, and what's important to you. That works very well. I think.
Well, we could just blow up the, from the comprehensive
Mhm.
plan, the pages where, because most of the different aspects of the goals are
Mhm.
on single page. We could just blow them up and people could get their little dots and say, you know.
Well,
bup, 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 bup,
And the
yeah.
dots are great too, because as someone who talks a lot during meetings, I often feel like I'm talking over people who might have an opinion and not be willing to verbally share it. And that's great too, because then everybody's more involved, I think.
I mean, I don't think there's, yeah, we have to reinvent any wheel here for this.
Yeah, we're basically starting fresh, right,
Yeah.
with this new comp plan, which is
I
nice.
think the one thing about this though, for the CIC is that we're not going to have to go back and reinvent the goals like we had to do when we started 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Here we were rewriting the goals, oh, we can't do it that way, wait a minute, because we can, you know,
That was
we
almost a
spent,
year.
yeah, it
To
took
do
us a
that.
heck of a long
Yeah.
time to go through that
Mhm.
and to rewrite them, but now since we've had firsthand options here, I think we kind of know what we have to do and we don't have to go through that. So setting up these pages would be like, yeah, we understand them. We've kind of got our head around all this stuff now.
So, go ahead, Sam. No, no.
But I was saying, getting back to, you know, a date that you brought up, I think we need a target at September. If that's what it's going to be, we just gotta move towards that.
Kids go back to school September 9th. I just heard.
September
Yes, we got that message yesterday.
Mhm.
Hmm.
But we need to start thinking of that, of what we in particular would want to work on. I mean, there are some clear goals that are immediate. And I think it would behoove us to try to identify what those are, which takes, you know, because what we are, as a group, have more of a vision of all the things going on in the town of Canandaigua than each individual group has. So I think that we're more able to go through there and determine that, but this is really important, and it needs to be one of the initial things that we work on.
I go back to exactly what Adeline said, though. I hear you, and yes, we have a lot more internal knowledge, but I want to make sure we're not drowning out, and I'm gonna pick on you for a second. You're very passionate about affordable housing. I literally have had somebody involved with our boards that came to me recently, just this past week, and said, we don't need to work on affordable housing. It's not needed. So I want to make sure that we're starting from a fresh perspective to give everybody a chance to put the input and so that we figure out, okay, where is the collective group, whatever that group is. You know, so,
And I agree with that, yes.
As far as a collective group, we're the collective group. We
Well, and I'm saying though, also trying to, the other boards. and
I know
committees
the
and
other
stuff.
boards, let's just take the planning board or the ECB. Do you
Mhm.
think they're gonna have any real interest in what the planning board accomplishes or what the ECB accomplishes or other other entities, other boards accomplish? I mean, there's, you know, they're kind of concerned and focused on what they're going to do for the next year. I'm not saying that that's part of the conversation, sure, have everybody talking, but when you say identifying goals, I think you really have to put some weight into the members of that particular board or committee that are actually going to work on it. I mean, they know what there is. So as far as me going up or I can see the CIC, we're going to be working on, you know, everything. So I have a priority of, you know, planting trees or something like that, and somebody else hasn't, but that's the CIC. The ECB, are they really going to be interested in what the planning board is going to do with their goals, or, you know, I don't get that.
If I can
Should
answer that,
be.
I would say as a town resident, I think the people you've got on your committees and your boards are the people that are the most interested in the future of the town. And they've chosen either their area of expertise or their area of greatest concern. But I think the people that the 60 or whatever people it is involved in these committees and boards are people that represent people who love Canandaigua and want the entire town as a whole to be successful. So I would think, I mean, I'm on several committees and I'm not on the planning board, but I enjoy attending their meetings and very interested in what's going on.
It's not about interest, it's about implementation. That's a different thing. We all, everybody on any board, like you say, is interested in what's happening.
Mhm.
But it is a particular responsible party who's going to have to implement them. And that's a little different than, somebody having an interest. in
But you're
what they're
trying to
doing.
define priorities. So are you defining priorities based on what's easier to implement or what is of greatest concern?
Well, I think there has to be a blend there.
Of
I mean, if
course.
everybody's gonna say, gee, what we need from the ECB is more in-person things, well, they may have a limit to 2 in-persons a year. So, you know what I'm saying? They have more, just like we do. We know what's happening in everything because we're right here. But each individual planning board, does the planning board know what the other boards are doing? Or they've got enough on their plate as it is to try to figure out how they're going to manage the goals that they are responsible for. That's all I'm saying,
I think
is
one
that
of
the
the,
responsible parties have a more heavier responsibility than anyone, and we need to listen to them, because we need to
Yeah.
acquiesce or
so,
something.
so Joyce, yes,
Acknowledge.
I think that there's always passion from the individual groups and they could go and accomplish, but one of the things that's missing that we haven't yet done with this new comprehensive plan that we'll need to do is identify the short-term, intermediate, long-term goals. What are the short-term goals? Those become, but that needs to be decided by the collective
Collective.
group.
Yeah.
That's everybody coming together saying, okay, here's the short-term goals, here's the ones that we're gonna work on for the next 3 to 5 years, and then the intermediate and then the long-term goals. And then when we boil down those short-term goals, if those are our focus, whatever those are, then, okay, planning board, are you comfortable in taking this, or ECB or whatever? You're the responsible entity, but every single one of those has sub-entities also involved. And so it may be a sub-entity helping to drive it for the responsible entity. And then that also helps to prioritize what the CIC's goals are. Once we have the short term, the items that we're gonna focus on for the immediate priority, that helps us to say, okay, these are the things the CIC should be helping to make sure that these drive. But there's always gonna be other things from the individual groups, and we've had it before where, okay, there might be a long-term goal, but the ECB might be very passionate about it. So they may have already started working on it, and that's great. And then we just check that off if they've accomplished it or whatever, but that's not the short-term immediate priority ones, right? So that piece we're still are missing. We will have to do that after the town board adopts this thing. And that's what I was thinking as part of this joint overall collective meeting, to identify these short, intermediate, and long-term goals, and then you
That
can
would
start to define.
That would
them.
be helpful. Yeah. Good.
So we're saying that the board would adopt a comprehensive plan and then we would have this meeting? Okay, got it. Just wanted to
Yep.
be clear.
Oksana, did you have something you wanted to jump in there?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you have something you wanted to jump in there with us?
No, the only thing, when we had that meeting at Ononda several years ago, it was supposed to be a strategic planning, but it took, you asked every committee to kind of talk about what they accomplished. And so we didn't have that much time to actually do strategic planning.
Yeah, you're right. It turned into, here's what we all do, because exactly
Mhm.
what Joyce and everybody said.
Right.
Don't all know what each other do. And I think it was great, but that was my thought too, is that it could end up being another one of those because we haven't had a joint meeting in so long. We almost need 2 days, one to catch everybody up to speed and then one to plan.
Right.
And
exactly.
It's a good point.
it almost would need to be a full day to get together.
So I've been involved in strategic planning sessions that are like a full day on a Saturday, and that's really where you get into a lot of detail and everything. But strategic planning is not an hour meeting. And so that's the thing that everybody needs to understand is even if we do this in the evening, this is a 2 to 3 hour meeting,
At least.
and that's keeping it moving.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it takes time to go through this. And that's why we always had the quarterly joint board meetings,
Right,
which we haven't had, so
but we will.
we will. We're gonna be optimistic.
Goal
right?
number one.
Joint
Every
board. All right. So, it's 9:30, speaking of time, we're halfway through the CIC meeting already. We need to talk about budget items. So with all that said, as a preface, let me just, I don't know how you want to go about this. Each of you represent a different committee, a different group. Shauna is starting to work on the development office budget for 2021. We had, CIC does have some expenditures relative to refreshments and the comprehensive plan, the updates to the comprehensive plan. It's a budget line 80/20, 400 and 412. And then the planning board has its own separate lines and everything. Is there any specific request for the CIC? I would think that you're gonna need to be doing some retreat type stuff and continue at least a placeholder for some money for implementation of the new comprehensive plan, whether that's printing stuff, whether that's
A consultant, if we decide that there is something where we need to have a consultant, when we did the NRI, when we did the open space, those were all consultant driven. The farmland, cancer plan, those were all, so I don't know, for right now, I can't think if there's anything big like that we would want to, but you never know.
We may
Right,
need a
right.
consultant to do strategic planning.
Yeah.
Unless you feel like you have, I know you have the knowledge, I'm not sure you have the time. And strategic planning isn't something you just take on. It
It's kind of
really
like the
needs to.
comprehensive plan. I mean, it's
Not like the well,
No,
it's
no,
not.
no, the process isn't, but it's like, we relied on Eric to
Right.
take care of
You
the
need
comprehensive
someone
plan.
to guide you
And
through
then
the process.
that
Yes.
was his time, I mean, he had that.
And he was intimately, he
Right,
knew
but it
that,
took a lot of time
the
for him,
subject.
so if Doug has that much time.
Yeah,
That's fine. There is, you talk about the different plans and stuff, there is a separate line where we talk about, like, for instance, the uptown plan, that sort of thing. One of the things I know that we're already gonna have to do, I don't think we're gonna have a choice, is an update to our zoning map in 2022. We haven't done it since
Yes.
1990, or since 2017, I believe was the last one that we did it, but we've had a variety of NUO updates.
Yes.
Obviously, the form-based code is an actual rezoning of those properties to form-based code, which by the way, we need to talk about, send out notices for that. And then I know with the Ag Committee, I've been having conversations with them about potentially a agriculture protection overlay district. So if any of those types of things, that'll all have to be actually reported actually on the zoning map. So I know that we're gonna have to do a zoning map update next year.
So what budget would that come out of?
So we'll put a separate line
Okay.
in, relative to like the CIC and
I see.
that type of stuff. But that's, some of those are town board, actual expenses, is what we call it. So, but that's definitely something that,
What is the budget for the CIC for this year?
currently for this year for like refreshments and that type of thing, it's $600 plus. We have comprehensive plan related expenditures of $300 for printing. We've got some notices and a variety of other things. I mean, it's kind of in a couple of different lines. CIC right now doesn't have its own separate line. We were talking about maybe changing that a little bit for next year. I know you had talked to me about that. And define it. That was one of the things, honestly, that we did with the adult rec program, right? And the benefit of that is then it's categorized specifically for that. And then you can track the expenditure specifically very clearly for that, instead of combining it or commingling it. For instance, like the planning board's line, which is the way it currently is. Okay. The uptown will have, I'm sure, some continued expenditures related to uptown. Sure.
Let's just talk about affordable housing. I don't even know if it's where it was with the planning board, but we'll just use it as an example. Say we decide that the Affordable Housing Committee decides that it needs a consultant for, for some project that we would like to initialize. Would that come out of the affordable housing budget then? And if so, how does that relate to CIC if we say to the Affordable Housing Committee, we would like you to move with this? Is that like, you know what I'm saying? The relationship between what the CIC is going to expect for a committee to do, which may concern, which may have some ramifications as far as cost for this or that. Is there
So-
any relationship, or is that just, that's the Affordable Housing Committee, and it doesn't have anything to do then with what the CIC is asked them to do?
Well, affordable housing doesn't have a budget.
Yeah, okay,
But-
I understand
but
that, but
like
that's
for
just
a
an
committee
example.
that did have a budget, for instance, if you're asking if the CIC is an advisory committee. So the CIC has no real authority to direct that the planning board has to X, Y, Z, whatever X, Y, Z, and spend the money, right? So if there is some sort of consultant, for instance, using this example, the planning board has absolute authority to hire a consultant if they need to hire, as long as it's within their budget parameters for whether that's reviewing a project or whether it's something that they're working on currently. So, that's where we've got to be in alignment, right? That's where the strategic and these joint meetings are important to make sure that there's an alignment, the CIC, the groups, the planning board, the different committees, so that then they take the initiative to do that, and we help them along that journey. So the CIC wouldn't necessarily have a lot of money that they would say, go do this, whatever this is.
Thinking about the NRI and that update, and Barb was the consultant with that.
Mhm.
What line did that go on? Did that go on what?
Yeah,
ACB or?
no, there was a specific line that we had created for planning open space conservation, separate from a conservation line. It's completely
Okay,
separate.
so those
But there's-
kind of big things could be separate, so we don't have to
Yes.
worry about
They've
putting
kind
them
of
into our budget. Okay.
developed, like, for example, the year that the history team was created as a project team, when they were initially started, they didn't have a budget, but the following year, after they got started, they said, well, we have some projects we'd like to do, like these.
Yeah.
So for the following year, they had a budget line created. So sometimes it kind of evolves into realization that they might need money.
And then it's also like the study for Middle Cheshire Road, that was its own separate budget line, those types of things. So that's the ECB has its own side. The ECB originally was part of the planning board budget line, and the ECB now has its own budget line and everything, so. Yeah. Let me just share with you some things that I know here. One of the things that we need to do is replace light fixtures on 332. The poles are actually starting to, literally the paint is coming off of the poles. They look terrible. Every third one is blown out. It's going to be a major project for us, converting them to LED, from sodium. That's what they currently are. Additionally, at the same time, I'm trying to, and Oksana, can you hear me okay? Because I need your help.
Yeah.
Additionally, we've got our gateway team, which has its own budget line, by the way, working on the gateway signage. But this is where it all relates. When we did the Uptown study, remember in the Uptown study, there was a component on wayfinding signage. Okay. Last week at the LDC meeting, last Thursday, the city came to the LDC meeting and said, hey, would you support doing some improvements for wayfinding signage in the city of Canandaigua? And I asked that they include Uptown also, so that we have uniform wayfinding signage for the Canandaigua community from Uptown all the way down to the lakefront. The LDC supported that. The LDC is paying the whole thing, so it's no money specific for that specific request. It's coming from the town or the city. Bergman is doing it. It was also the one who started our, or did our Uptown study for us. But one of the things that I would think will probably come out of that, in addition to wayfinding signage, are things like banners and those types of things that were called out in the Uptown study to then attach to these light poles. So really having a consistent theme, I think that that's going to be a 2022 need, I guess is what I would say, because we know that we have a situation with the light poles and the light fixtures themselves. Meanwhile, this whole wayfinding signage and everything is progressing with the LDC. So the timing is such, it's all kind of happening together. It would be the logical time to implement that. So I think that's definitely a 22 action item.
So Doug, they contracted with Bergman, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Doug,
Yes.
since that's a state road, why is this town's responsibility?
Because the town accepted dedication of them all back in the day.
Is that right?
And so now we got. to grab-
Does that mean we can put in turning lanes wherever we want?
It accepts the dedication of the light poles,
Just the light poles.
the street lights, street lights.
And what about the,
trees need attention? too.
yeah.
And those are actually still DOTs.
Oh, that's-
But aren't
Of
we
course,
responsible
just
for
to make it-
maintenance?
No,
We're not?
no DOT is.
Jim said we were.
No, so the other day, during the storm, a tree branch actually came down across 332 and I stopped and I pulled it off to the side and I said to Jim, hey, can you send somebody out to finish cutting that off? Because it was still hanging on. And Jim's like, I can't, I gotta call DOT. It's blocking the road, somebody.
Well, can we take over ownership? I mean, we did at the lamps, certainly we could do ground that the lamps are on, and that includes. with
We
the
need
trees.
to, it's a good
We had a
question.
or do we have like a maintenance agreement we were talking about?
That's only for mowing the grass on 332.
Not the trees.
It's not the trees.
And we need to get control of those trees or lack of.
It's, we have a variety of issues we need to discuss with DOT. I'll make a note of it.
But the uptown, the appearance, it's going to be more and more important.
Yes.
Especially with the wayfinding signs.
Yeah.
And new light poles, and it stands to reason that we take over the maintenance of the trees and the grass and do a much better job than we've
Yeah.
currently been doing, because frankly, it is not a nice sign when you come into the town of Canada. You know, there's weeds all, I just don't understand people that don't take pride in the work that they do, you know? And I'm sorry, I know our highway department does that, but I mean, I'd be out there pulling those damn weeds by hand.
Doug,
if
how
I
does
were
the
doing that.
city do it on 332 in the city? Or do they have ownership of the medians and such then? Is that?
In the city, that's
city.
the downtown business.
I know, I just
association.
Yeah,
wondering how
but
they.
so the light poles, actually, the city just purchased all of those
Okay.
from the utility companies and the city owns all of those.
So we couldn't own the medians like they do in the city?
Well, not the medians. So the medians technically, yes, so there's an arterial maintenance agreement, that's what it's called with DOT
Okay.
for the city, for them to do all that. So we could do something like that. So, but you're talking about those two different things. So,
Sidewalk.
so let's talk about Uptown, ending at Emerson and Thomas Road. Let's start with that. So
Yes.
that primarily is concrete medians or something. There's really no grass in that whole stretch from tops
But
up
there are
to.
weeds.
There's weeds that grow up through the grass, right? And DOT actually there is one stretch of grass, I take that back, right in front of Farnsworth Chevrolet that our highway department does mow. But there are weeds that come up through the grass and everything else. The challenge is, there's the agreements with DOT, you're limited on what you can put on those to kill the weeds and those.
I
types
know,
of
I
things.
understand that, yes.
And then from Emerson Thomas Road north, that's primarily all grass. And
Yes.
that's net
Yes.
median, and that goes all the way up through, the strategic primary protection area, yada. So highway mows that. So DOT pays us to mow that 3 times a year. Highway mows that about once every 3 to 4 weeks. But that's done with the big tractors,
Yes.
like
I
the
know,
big
yes.
Holland blue tractor that's got the wing on it. So to your point, though, that doesn't allow them to get up close to like the reflective markers and the other stuff on 332, so it leaves weeds there, right? So then the only way to go back and do that is weed eating, sending somebody out there with weed
Or
eaters
plant
and that sort of thing.
wildflowers.
Well,
So we've asked DOT about that in the past, and they've said no.
Yeah,
It
you
works
know,
the
it's
same
really,
way.
if
You
you
need to have
drive
that,
through
yeah.
the state of South Carolina, they did that years ago. They
Yeah.
did that back when I lived there. a
North
long,
Carolina
long time
does it
ago.
too.
It's beautiful.
Well, we have a very big laundry list of things to ask DOT about.
Yeah.
Wildflowers on the list. Again, I'm just gonna add that on there. So,
South Carolina doesn't have salt.
Yeah.
I wonder- I
They
wonder if that
do have
impacted-
salt water. And they have some brackish water.
I just wonder
So
if
light
they
poles,
get-
what else is on the list?
okay, so that's, all right, so moving on, let's, Oksana, your favorite subject, so Currently, celebrations, contractual, we've got 2,500 for the special events committee. To do that, to do theoretically Halloween at Ononda plus 4th of July parade and whatever else comes along. Is there anything specific you want to report on or request or anything?
Well, until we have a special events meeting to plan for next year, I don't know what to tell you. So can you wait like a couple of weeks so I can get back to you on that?
Sure. Yep.
Along those lines, in Parks and Rec, we've talked about having a winter festival, which would be nice to have the events committee work together with us on that. So that's going to require a bit of a budget. I can't see where it requires a whole lot. I don't know. I'm not, you know, I'm the idea person. I don't know the details, but
Well, and things like tonight, is that parks or special
Yeah,
events?
what is it?
Parks.
Parks, okay.
That's part.
Because I think that's gonna be, things like that will be expanding hopefully.
yeah,
next
so
year.
it'll probably be in the
Oh, yeah.
parks
Hopefully
budget,
the
but
budget's out.
Yeah.
Oksana knows about it because I emailed her about it, and perhaps they'll be interested in helping.
It's gonna be raining really hard.
No, it's not.
Oksana, you, just so everybody's aware here, Halloween at Ononda for 2021 is on, correct?
Yes, yes.
And then
So
going-
that's the only event that I talked to you about because we don't know anything yet about the ribbon cutting at Ononda Park with New York State.
yes. So it's getting close. It sounds like it's very, very close. We should have a closing date pretty soon on that, so. Okay.
Doug, I just have
Yes,
a
sir.
quick question. When we're talking about the light poles, you know, for the uptown, that they're going to match what's already in the city, the new ones they put up?
No.
Oh, they're going to be different.
No, they'd be, so it's keeping the poles. We're trying to do this as cost effectively as possible.
Sure.
Because this is extremely expensive. Using the existing posts that are there.
Okay,
Fixing whatever needs to be fixed, but the
The
heads have to be
heads.
replaced.
right, okay,
With the new LED and everything.
sure.
But we, Jim did look for us. There is a way to put clamps on those existing poles so that we can put banners.
Banners
or
and stuff,
whatever else.
festivals and all that. Okay, great.
No nice sort of grants or anything for that?
Oh.
There is
There
some.
there is, but it's, there's a whole variety of strings that come with
But
it.
it doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll trust you.
Yeah. I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about parks and rec and all that stuff.
Well, Parks and Rec is pretty much at your mercy because I mean, I can remember when the budget was $200,000.
Last year was 1.3 million, so.
So I hesitate, and I don't know about Mark, but I hesitate to say make it 1.5 million, but I could easily do that. I am going to tell you that I would like $7,500 back for the senior program because I have some plans.
And I'm also on the Parks Committee and I'd like to see if we can implement anything from the Middle Cheshire Road Plan. If there's any room in the budget to, you know, I personally, I'd like to see working on finishing the off-road trail to the arterial or 5 and 20 intersection is the first priority from that plan.
So let me start with her and come back to you. The current budget is 2,500 for
I
adult.
know it is, and that's virtually nothing.
Now you're partnering though, aren't you, with Quail Summit? No,
What
you're
was
not.
it?
200% increase.
Please.
Have you heard of the tax cap?
You ever hear of asking for more and accepting less? One of the things I would like to do is offer the trips again. And I think that it's time that the town of Canandaigua will offer residents a subsidy for those trips. So it doesn't have to be a lot. Town of Victor, I think, offers a $25 subsidy per resident, and the non-residents pay, they are welcome to come, but they pay the full price.
Mhm.
But that was one thing I did. So the other thing is the Winter Festival is clearly a parks event. And so that will be, that there'll be a
But that
cost.
wouldn't be the adult rec budget.
That would be a dog back.
Well, whatever. It's something that will have to be budgeted if we
Right,
decide to do it. And when I talked about it at the meeting, everybody was
Everybody
really,
liked it, yeah.
yeah, they all liked the idea of doing something like that.
So the one thing I would say about like the Winter Festival, even the Middle Cheshire Road, the Parks Committee should really in a meeting discuss what the request is and make the request.
Yes, I
as part
understand
of
that,
the-
right,
So,
right.
okay. The adult rec, so this is where two of you have got to work together with the city because the adult rec program is completely a 50-50 match with the city. So if it's 7,500 each, that's 15
Yeah,
grand. I
yeah.
don't think they're gonna get
No,
that.
we don't need that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out.
So
and
do we
then
have
see
5,000 right now?
2,500 from us and 2,500 from them.
Wow, let's spend it. Let's spend it.
Let's spend it.
So, but that's where you've also got to coordinate with Heather and she can talk with John and stuff, but yeah. So that's always been a 50-50 split, city town,
Okay.
the adult rec, that was our agreement.
Okay. So, Lindsay has the outhouse facility scheduled for Thursdays after the kids are done. So is there a cost associated with that to? Yeah, really?
Yeah, Parks charges adult rec.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Honest to God.
No, Karen.
We
there's
got up
no
that
cost.
1.4 from somewhere. $80 at a time.
Whatever. Okay,
Uh,
so just double it.
She doesn't need a triple now, she just needs a
I wrote
double.
Karen's wish list. is what my- But I think that now is the appropriate time. That's exactly why we're having these conversations. You guys should really be formalizing a plan for next year and jointly with the city specific for adult rec, if it includes 3 trips, 5 trips, whatever, what the expenditures are that are gonna be needed for that.
Well, so, shouldn't the city have a representative come to our Parks and Rec committee?
Heather is supposed to be.
It's supposed to be Heather. The last meeting that we had, she had some CPR class for her rec programs. So that's why she missed last month's meeting, but going forward, she'll be at our meetings.
Okay.
She was at one 2 months ago, I think.
Yeah.
wasn't she? Yeah.
So that's part of our agreement. The city will have a representative at the Parks and Rec.
Could I bring up a bigger ticket item that's got to do with park and rec and goals and comprehensive plan? And I know you and Jared had a conversation on the difference between the park and rec fee and the open space fund and so on, so that we're not flat-footed like it seemed we were when the opportunity arose to acquire land. What are we doing in the big picture of beefing up the open space fund?
Okay.
How are we gonna fund it? You know, we're gonna have money available next time, and if a parcel becomes available that was, you know, again, it's a priority goal that we're going to
Okay, so let's talk about
acquire
that for a
land
second.
and so on.
So open space and conservation is completely separate from Parks and Rec. So let's.
I
treat
don't
them-
think everybody
let's treat
understood.
them- Okay. So, and really the two should not be commingled. They're complete separate, different funds. They're separate reserves. You can't use one for the other, and vice versa. Even the enabling legislation that allows us to charge that park and rec fee does not allow us to charge open space fee, for instance. So the planning board couldn't say, oh, or even the town board for that matter, they can't say, if you don't, instead of giving $1,000 for the park and rec, give it to open space, they can't do it. So it's.
So how are we gonna
Okay,
fund that
yeah.
acquisition?
Now, so 2 things. So we created, starting with the 2021 budget, there actually is a conservation easement line in the town budget. So that was new. Additionally, at the end of the year last year, the town board put extra money, basically it was unexpended funds in the open space fund. The open space fund has over $1 million in it today. Okay, so it's significantly more than what it had been. Now, with all that said, Sarah and I are collectively working on a plan, there is a complete change in the PDR program, okay? And so what we're working on right now is, and it's just very conceptual at this point, a much broader conservation program is what I would call it, a conservation easement program that would have different avenues, including the types of things that we potentially put easements on, where the town of Canada will hold the easements, the different funding avenues that may contribute to that, as well as different grant programs and how that may all work. We've got to really kind of put together a draft and then start floating that draft out to the various boards and committees. Is it possible? So here's the conversation that we had a year or so, right before COVID, I think it was. We were talking about creating a open space fee, right, associated with new development. First of all, I don't know whether or not the town board would support that or not, because I hear conflicting from many members, but nothing has officially been presented. From a legal perspective, there's nothing really that gives us the authority to charge that. The town attorney said, you can do anything until somebody sues you and you lose in court, right? So that's the risk that we take with that. However, with that said, I think the last 3 years, the CIC and the ECB had requested that the town board at the end of the year contribute unexpended funds, any unexpended funds, to make at least a $100,000 contribution to the open space fund. And last year, the town board contributed $400,000 to the open space fund. So they've been putting money into it.
Okay, and that money would be available, for instance, for the RSM frontage, if and when.
If the town board wanted to purchase that for the purposes of open space, not for recreation. Now, there is some overlap, but
Parks one has what, 600,000-700,000 in it?
I think it's down to 3, 4. Motion Junction is eating up a lot of that. We're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on
Yeah, I know.
Motion Junction. So,
And that came from that.
but yes, so there is
So
money
it's
there,
getting
and
beefed- it's getting beefed up.
but we've got to really rethink the way we do that. And really, I think, you know, a turning point for us was when we got the PDR for Keith Purdy on Sand Hill Road. That's the first one where the town is actually holding the conservation easement. So that launches, that's a whole new ballgame for us, right? So now,
Yeah, we're now
We've gotta-
responsible to make sure that they don't, you know, do something they're not supposed to on it. It's up to us to make sure we monitor it regularly, and it's ours. It's theirs, but we're in charge of making sure it stays the way it
It
is.
won't become a problem until we're all dead. I mean, it will be
I-
harmed within a.
Right,
foreseeable
honestly, it's
future.
not, you know,
The
realistically,
enforcement
it's
will
not
be-
something that we anticipate, but in the future, what if they don't
Yeah.
own it and the
Yeah.
future owners don't agree with it or something? That's something we have to protect.
So what distinction are we making between open space and conservation easements? And excluding like PDRs or excluding farmland, because that's not, is that be considered open space, or is that just conservation easement?
no, it's open space. So in
All of
basic-
that is open space. So
Mhm.
when you're talking about.
For the open space fund, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I'm saying,
Yeah.
is the conservation easement line item a
Mhm.
part of open space? That's what I'm saying, ultimately.
So there's
Or is
a,
that a separate, that's what I'm asking, what makes the separation? If it's
so there's a conservation easement budget line to allow us to really start doing some of the work, including the work that we hired LaBella for. That was funded through the general fund. That was not funded by sources of revenue coming back into the budget of the open space fund, open space fund being separately. In addition, we still have the open space fund that could be allocated for a specific project. Anytime the town board allocates money from the open space fund, it has to be for a specific purpose related to conservation, open space. Basically, those are the two categories, and it is subject to permissive referendum. So that's defined in the law that established the open space reserve.
So
Okay.
conservation easement is mainly the expenses that would take care
Operational
of.
logistics.
Yes.
making
Yeah.
it-
Okay.
Yeah, so would it be
those
right
types
to
of
say that like the conservation easement line, it could be expenses related to monitoring or
Yes.
like
Yes.
what Labella did, whereas the
Right.
open space fund itself might be to actually purchase the
To
easement.
acquire, it deals with
Or
the
purchase.
acquisition of the conservation easement. Yeah, or the land for that matter. But keep in mind, if the town acquires the land, it comes off the tax rolls. And And I know we've had a lot of conversations about that. If we acquire a conservation easement, it remains on the tax roll. So I think collectively, what I keep hearing from the town board is there's support for the conservation easements and less support for the acquisition, generally speaking.
Could you define permission
Sure.
for the?
Yeah. So basically, there are certain parameters that automatically are subject to permissive referendum. For instance, if we're going to take money out in this example, say we're going to take $100,000 out of the open space reserve because we're going to
It's park.
purchase a conservation easement on a particular piece of property. The town board has to provide notice of that, public hearing of it, we provide notice of it. The town board then votes, yes, we're going to take that $100,000 out of the open space fund in this example. But prior to me actually being able to take the $100,000 out, I have to wait 45 days from the date of the notice of when that was all given, because the residents have the right under permissive referendum to start a petition. There are specific parameters associated with the petition. The petition then gets filed with the town clerk. Once that happened, that stops my ability to pull that money, even though the town board has authorized me, it stops my ability to take that 100,000 in this example out of the open space fund, and then it goes to a vote of the residents at the next election. And then the residents would either say yes or no. So there are any number of our reserve funds that are set up that are subject to permissive referendum. A silly one that I think is silly, our technology reserve fund is subject to permissive referendum. So if we're going to take money out of our technology reserve fund to purchase something technology related, even if it's $10,000, that's subject to permissive referendum. So if the voters wanted to stop us from taking that out of the reserve fund, they could.
So, but how often does that happen?
Where they actually initiate the petition, I've never seen it happen.
So somebody would have to bitch when you want to go buy one of these things.
So you said that,
So you put it in their backyard.
you said conservation easement stays on the tax roll?
Yes,
So who pays the taxes?
the landowner.
The landowner.
Owns the property.
Okay.
But they're essentially getting
It's
money for
different.
extinguishing the development rights.
That's right. So, but they're still paying it as a vacant land assessment essentially.
Theoretically, it would
It's
be.
like
vacant
lower
land,
tax.
yes.
Or farmland.
Or farming,
Yeah.
yes, I understand.
So big changes coming for the conservation program in general is what I would say. That's gonna be a hot topic for 2022, for sure.
Back to parks though,
Mhm.
since I don't think we finished
Yep,
that though.
yep.
I really would like to advocate if we can do anything going down from the Middle Cheshire Road plan. And I also spent some time recently going door to door and I heard a lot of residents along Middle Cheshire. I was not previously aware that there's no sewer in the area from 5 and 20 over to Ferris Hills. And I had some residents in that area requesting sewer. So that,
From the church down to Fox Ridge, there's no source.
yeah, which seemed like that might be a place to consider utilizing some of the stimulus money. Because that seems an odd area, given that it's so directly connected to the lake and it's right in between
It's the topography.
sewage areas already.
It's the
so
topography. So that's, so that was actually all, the analysis was done of that with the sewer master plan. It wasn't identified as a priority in the sewer master plan. And part of it is because of the topography. It goes uphill there. And so there would have to be additional pump stations. You also can't gift municipal resources. So it would actually be the requirement of a special district in order to do that. And the residents generally, when it gets to like including pump stations, they generally say that it's cost prohibitive. They don't want to do it. That's the issue we've had even with Cheshire. The residents say it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I knew that
So-
with Cheshire. but
So they're
I was just
actually.
saying if it were something that were ever to be done, it would make sense with trail
There's-
construction. at the
There's
same
that
time.
area, there's also Acorn Hills, another one that's just like that, that was identified, the whole analysis was done as part of the sewer master plan, that's why it's, we've done all these analysis, these plans, that's why, we keep going back and referring to them, because there's a lot of detail in them associated with things like that. But, that becomes the challenge, the sidewalk on Middle Cheshire Road, I know that, step one was doing the plan, right? Step two is if the parks, and here's what I would say in response to that specifically, and that's that sidewalk. the Parks and Rec Committee should say, hey, this is a priority, please make this happen, town board, okay? Then secondarily, now that we have the study that's been completed, that allows us to apply for a grant to actually complete. So then we should be doing that this next window, which by the way, that just opened. So
The tip.
Parks and Rec,
Tap.
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 So Parks and Rec Committee, at your next meeting, you should be saying,
Mhm.
town board, please make application to extend that sidewalk, because then that's essentially, that helps cover a lot of the cost of that.
But one of the things that you're going to be doing is the intersection of Middle Cheshire Road and 520.
DOT, not us,
One would
but
hope.
yes.
Yeah, and on that Middle Cheshire Road study, there was like a corner little
Way
station,
type thing.
whatever you want to call it, that it's, I'm merely a woman. But it always makes sense, if you're gonna be digging up a corner, do whatever you have in the plans for the next 5 years at that time, instead
that
of
be
digging
great?
it up 3 or 4
Makes so much
times, you
sense,
know?
And that'd be great. So the DOT, they will only construct per whatever funding source that they have for any given particular project. And so the funding source for the improvements that they're gonna be doing is a safety aspect. And what they're doing is installing those large poles with the arms on them with the lights past the intersections. The one thing that they will do is they'll set them back far enough. They told us to give us room because they know that we have the study. They were part of the study,
Oh, that's
but they
really
won't do
generous of
any.
them.
They won't do any. of
Well,
the-
does that property belong to the DOT or does that
Right
property
away.
belong to the town of
Yeah,
Canada?
it's in the right way. COT.
So we'll have to go back to them again if you're going to complete whatever's in the Middle Cheshire Road study.
So for instance, the Middle Cheshire Road study, the next step really would be implementation of that plan, right? And then applying for a TAP grant associated with whatever improvement it is that you're trying to do with that. These are very, but the way these grants work is they're very, very specific. You can't apply for the TAP grant if you haven't done the UPWP study first. So that's what the Middle Cheshire Road
Well, that's
study
the
is.
tip.
Oh, sorry, tip.
The TIP is a transportation
Yes.
improvement plan, which is part of the Genesee Transportation.
That's not on my list.
The TAP is a state program called the Transportation Alternatives Program, which has recently been combined with the CAQ something. It's all air
It's
quality.
ridiculous.
Well, and they're different purposes. So we have a TIP and a TAP, and I actually on my list is to call Bob Williams to ask him, should we go forward with the TIP program? But his email program won't accept my emails, so I gotta call him and all that.
Well,
But
just to give you another example of this, so we just, and I'm not suggesting that we don't keep pushing forward on Middle Cheshire Road, because there are certain aspects of it I think we can. There are certain aspects, like the whole thing next to the water tank, the city has said that's dead on arrival. There's no way that they're gonna allow that to happen across their property. So we've got, many more conversations to have all regarding that. But back up 5 years ago, remember we had asked the county to look at Lakeshore Drive in 364. Okay, and they did the first section. They are just now applying for the grant for the 364 portion from Marvin Sands Drive to Lakeshore Drive. So it takes an incredible amount of time to work through these grant programs.
So let's get going.
Yeah, let's go. Okay, we talked about Middle Cheshire Road. What else in terms of Parks and Rec? Any other big? I mean, obviously, and Lindsay will sit down with us when we go through the budget, but if there's
The big
anything from the
thing, the
committee.
big thing was lakefront property, that in the Parks and Rec master plan and in the master plan update for the town, that was a critical issue that people have, more access to the lake, and whatever that means. And so, well, you all, I mean, I know you've been trying, but that is a critical thing.
So here's what I would say in response to that. Gary, close your ears for a second. If the Parks and Rec Committee or individuals feel strongly about that, you need to be lobbying your elected town board members today, because I need that direction from them that I'm not getting. Okay? So I need help. I can't do that by myself.
I had a lot of great paint I can throw at your house.
I didn't mean that. kind of-
That's not what you meant.
The other major expenditure I've heard that us whispering about in the Parks Committee is potentially really upgrading the cabins at Onondaga, because we did hear that that's the only other thing I could see, showing up. That's infancy stages right now. So.
That's kind of in process. We have a meeting coming up. We actually, that's in the 21 budget, is to start with replacing one. The one thing I don't want to do, and this, we have a meeting tomorrow with MRB, and then that's just the start, and then we need to have public meetings and a variety of different things. We have money in the 21 budget to replace Latani. Latani is in very bad condition on the uplands specifically. And that was the plan, is we'd start replacing the cabins on the upland. But I don't want to go through and just replacing cabins until we have a master plan on what it is that we're going to do with the uplands, because I'm afraid we'll end up putting them and then be like, oh, that's not where they should have went. They should be moved. So I want to get the plan first before we start doing it. But
Is that
So
something you
MRB
want from
gonna
the
do
Parks Committee?
yeah,
or
so we have an internal meeting, I think it's tomorrow, right?
That's Friday.
Oh, it's Friday. So we have an internal meeting just to kind of talk about logistics on how we're going to start this process, because town board's already authorized us to hire MRB to help with all of this and all that stuff. The very next step is we need to start meeting with Parks Committee and public meetings with neighboring landowners, anybody that wants to be involved in what it is that they would like to see on the uplands and what that would look like 10 years from now. And so we need a lot of input involvement.
I'd like to see a pad up there for like a food truck, or I would like to see more use of the uplands. But when I talked to people last winter about doing a winter festival, and I mentioned a hot chocolate stand.
That would be a
and like,
must.
oh yeah, it'd be great to have hot dogs, and then somebody's, oh, we could have that donut thing, but it actually would require one pad would be really good to have. You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yep.
And as long as you're doing construction, it doesn't seem, you could pick a strategic spot like right near where the gate is.
Right. Well, there's so many things that we need to incorporate in the plan. Obviously, we had never had, up until right before COVID, a survey actually even of the uplands. Come to find out, the trail's not even on the town property. So that's issue number one, right? Then we never had anything at all that collectively had like where all the water and sewer lines are. So we have that. So I'm starting with very basic steps here. Then the next thing is that we need to really incorporate is, okay, we don't have any vehicle access to any of the upland cabins right now. While we can't do it on the lakefront, we could absolutely do it on the upland. So start to plan out what that looks like and try to incorporate the winter stuff still so that we're not interfering with that. And then the upgrades to the cabins. I know I've heard people say to me, why don't you have tent sites, allow tent sites at least up there? All those types of things need to be discussed and hashed out and all that type of stuff. That's what I'm talking about. Then once we have a plan, then we can figure out, okay, this cabin is going to stay here, so we can replace this one, or this one maybe we need to move it, and so it doesn't. And a lot of that also depends on like where the water and sewer lines and stuff are. That's how I have to get all that and everything. So a lot of work to be done in the uplands. It's exciting, but we're going to need everybody's input and involvement to come up with a plan so that we can go build the plan.
The other thing that I've already requested is a mat to the lake for swimming, for handicap.
All right.
Yes.
Let's see, no.
Yep.
I don't know how much those cost. I don't think they cost all that much.
Can it be a snake repellent mat too? That'd be great.
No, I can't walk.
I
the
know, I
lake.
understand completely.
I can't do that.
I understand.
And I'm not the only one. that's
Oh,
on
no, I
Canandaigua.
agree.
So conservation, we've talked about a lot of the different things. One of the things that we had in the 21 budget was a new line, forestry, the tree advisory committee group. I know a couple of you are involved with that. Obviously, that's where we paid for the gypsy moss spraying, came out of that line, as well as there was money in for a DEC grant.
Which they didn't do this year,
Right.
and I'm still waiting, and as of right now, they still haven't released it, but it's probably something, if they make it available next year, we'd still be interested in. There's no match requirement, so it's basically they pay for our entire tree studies. So I think that's still something we should keep.
More work to do in terms of that. We have a line that's called traffic capital equipment. That's actually where the gateway signs, Oksana, any update you want to provide in terms of gateway signs?
Well, we have a meeting tomorrow, and we received several quotes from different vendors, and we don't have anything concrete yet to report on.
Sal, I know you've been doing a lot of research on different stuff.
Yes, exactly. In fact, I've been out visiting, some of the vendors and things like that, just to get an idea, different types of materials, and also driving around. I know at our last meeting, we had pointed out the new sign at the library.
Yeah.
So I went to visit that yesterday, and also 2 or 3 signs before you get to the library, for consideration. Also in different areas, I know that we were thinking about perhaps a uniform sign for all the different locations. However, depending on what locations we're going to choose, I can see different size sign on some of it. Some of the signs that are up now from the town, unless you know they're there, you don't even see them.
You drive by.
Yeah, you just drive by them, so.
The classic town of Canandaigua zoning laws in effect. Right?
You got
Yep.
it,
That's what they are.
exactly.
And I've actually had somebody tell me that's good enough.
Oh, yeah. No, no.
It's
But I
so
think-
welcoming.
I think once this gets rolling, hopefully tomorrow will be a productive meeting, with ideas and coming in, be able to move forward on that. And then also, what we have a
And-
budget, it's 17,000.
Yeah, so the.
Right.
Strictly for gateway signs is 12,000.
Okay,
And then there's an additional 5,000 that was in the 2021 budget. That was intended for us to purchase those electronic signs that flash your speed.
yes,
To put one actually in your outhouse park. That was the original intent of that, because there were so many people going so fast on Outhouse Road, trying to get people to slow down over there. But there is 17,000 still in that.
okay.
I think Oksana.
So Doug, for next year, we probably need to add 20,000 in the budget. Because we're thinking of like maybe 8 signs total. So if we can contract with someone this year for 4 or 5 signs, that would, I don't even think 17,000 would be enough for this year. But, we can do more signs next year.
Anything else on signs?
I was mentioning to Sal real quick, if there's a color concept, I know when we start doing park signs and things like that, it'd be nice if we could keep a consistent color theme throughout as we go.
Well, all of our park signs are all blue and white, just like the town hall signs. So those are all the same, but I know they were exploring whatever with their team.
Right.
Yeah, we had that conversation. There are some that agree that it should stay the same color scheme, and others that say, well, this is our chance to really decide if that's what we want. And over time, with so many signs going in with gateway signs, there was a discussion that maybe it doesn't need to be. So they haven't decided that quite yet.
Right.
We're also hoping that some of the
So
signs
Doug,
come back with some ideas too. So
Doug, we decided that we will have 2 meetings a month.
Good, sounds like progress.
Yeah.
It's the season. Then the other one that relates to the comprehensive plan is economic development. Obviously, you all know we have our joint LDC, Local Development Corporation. Our agreement, our intermunicipal agreement with the city of Canandaigua was up at the end of this year. So we're looking to do a new agreement, and that's realistically probably what it's going to end up being is a reduction in the funding for the LDC from 50,000 to 25,000, more than likely, but we'll see. So
Is
to be
that,
determined.
is that because we're not using the money, or? Or,
I
I didn't say we, the LDC.
It's, well, the LDC, they have been, like, for instance, the wayfinding stuff, so they are doing that.
Okay.
They have been spending money on a variety of different things. They contributed to the, what's it called, the Central on Main, the LDC
Yes,
is involved with
yeah,
that,
Central,
making that
okay.
happen. The LDC is actually leading an effort on the Canandaigua Beverage Trail. I know I've had Tuition Distilling in the town of Canandaigua, Star Cider in the town of Canandaigua, Square Knot in the town of Canandaigua, have all said to me they're really glad that we're doing that. I even had a conversation I mentioned with John Milp about that from a dairy side of things, because it's part of the beverage trail. Because we don't have a Canandaigua Beverage Trail currently. So the LDC is leading that effort. The LDC is really working on a lot of different economic development, recruitment, job retention, business retention type of items. The other big one is the LDC actually is the entity that made the match for the interactive transportation study for the whole connection of downtown to the lakefront and everything. That was the city north of town contributed directly to that. And that was the LDC that was driving that, and they are the control group associated with that. So they're involved in a lot of different things. It's just, it's like just starting out a new entity and organization. It's just taking some time. But I guess, Sal, to answer your question, I think it has more to do with political pressure than anything, the reduction. I don't see a specific tie to something directly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Other questions, other budget requests, anything for your groups or anything? I love that everybody's so passionate about specific things, and that's where it's like, okay, we gotta take all that and try to funnel it in to get some stuff done. Which brings me back to strategic planning. where we started, so.
Right.
Where's my sticker?
That's right.
So that is so important. All right, so, but going back to that, so if we start to work on what a strategic planning session might look like, we'll figure out logistics, but at the end of September, everybody's in agreement with. And what I would like to do is say to the town board specifically and all of our boards that the CIC is scheduled a strategic session. They're inviting all the boards and would like all the boards to attend, but it's happening because the CIC is doing it, if you're in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Tell them you're bringing donuts. to the strategic planning. My committees have never had donuts.
Chuck, you've been awfully quiet. Anything you'd like to add for the good of the order?
No, how were the donuts? That's what I I'll definitely have to be there next time so I can partake. No, not really. I think it was a good meeting. I think the strategic meeting is certainly makes sense. I think what you can do is, if assuming that the comp plan update is adopted in August, then that the strategic meeting should sort of be an introduction to all the boards as to the comp plan. I think you can then ask, if you're looking for priorities from each committee and board, for them to digest the plan and come back possibly before the end of the year and give you sort of their hit items that they'd like to shoot for. And then I would also recommend that consider maybe a quarterly update that the boards and committees report back to the CIC, so that you can keep track of what they're doing and that they're staying on target as far as meeting those goals. So yeah, I think it's a good plan. Did they do anything with the form-based code last night, or was that just postponed also?
It was postponed to August. We need county feedback and also just give a little bit more time for everybody to digest it. But there's two other pieces of that that's missing that we may have to delay that to September. I think that the idea, the concept, it sounds to me like everybody's on board with that, but we actually need a local law to actually put it into codes. It's a standalone document, the form-based code, but we
Understood.
still need to put it in code, and then it's actually a rezoning of all of those parcels to form-based codes. And so we've got to provide the public notifications and the notices to all of those individual landowners and actually a zoning map update, even if we wait a second to actually update the map, it's got to be included in the language. Few
And how
more
did,
go through.
how did the hearing on the billboard, Lamar, go?
Same, we continued that for the same purpose of the county input and just give a little bit more time, but Gary,
Okay.
feel free to jump in, but I think collectively, everybody's on board with that moving forward, generally speaking. I mean, some details to work out, but I think
Right.
generally speaking.
We are, we moved it forward from the ordinance committee, right, Tom?
Yeah. Yeah,
And the conservation subdivision, you set a hearing for that?
Yes, set up a public hearing for that one. The digital billboards, the video displays, whatever you want to call it, it's, so if you drive by the one at the Civic Center, it's nothing like that. That's got those flashy lights. That's not at all what this is. This is just like a billboard that changes. It's a changeable billboard. And so it changes every 10 seconds. Is that what it is?
Like the
Right,
one on
minimum of
390.
So basically it's every 3 cars see one ad and then the next 3 see something else. But the agreement, the update to the agreement is instead of a 2-sided sign on 332, a 1-sided sign that would go in the current place of the existing sign. So you will see it coming south on 332, but when you're going north on 332, you actually won't see it because of the tree lines that's there, just like the one that's currently there. Same size and everything as the one that's currently there. And then replacing the 2 in front of Big Lots with 1 there, so.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to prolong the meeting anymore.
Thanks, Jeff.
Anybody have anything else? Well, with that, we can adjourn. Everybody's good with it.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye,
Bye. Thanks.
Okay,
Bye, Oksana.
thank you, everyone.
Bye, Oksana.
See you tomorrow. Oksana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think